Welcome to part 4 of this series on the masculine archetypes. We've covered the hero, the lover, and the magician so far. And in this episode, we're going to be exploring how to awaken the archetype of the king. My name's Jasper Brown, and welcome to The Conscious Masculine. In this episode, I want to really give you guys an overview of the king, the qualities and the shadows that he possesses, as well as some very concrete examples that you can find in literature and in film and in real life. So you can start to see different examples of how the king archetype and his qualities is embodied, both in the positive and also the negative sense. And I think you'll find that very interesting. And just like in the other episodes, I'll also be sharing a step-by-step process to help you guys awaken the king archetype in your own life. And as always, I'll be weaving my own story and how I relate to this archetype throughout this episode. So settle in, buckle up, grab yourself a drink. This might be a long episode. I have a lot to say on this topic. So let's start with the overview of the archetype of the king. So this symbol of the king holds a place above all others. In many ways, the king can really be seen as the central archetype that unites all of the other masculine archetypes. He is the culmination of a man's process of development and the evolution of his character to the fullest extent. He is the soul, the father, the chief, and the chosen leader in whom others place their trust. He embodies both the light of the sun, the holy mountain, and the divine law. He balances strength and power with order, benevolence, and wisdom. And it's through his strength and fertility that he brings prosperity and blessings to the land and to his people. The king sacrifices his own individualistic goals to live a life of service and responsibility. And really, the quality of his rule lays the foundation for a healthy culture in the world around him. The king archetype really represents the most ideal expressions of a man's masculinity. It's like the most powerful and profound expression of a man's gifts, as well as the qualities that he can offer to the other people around him, the people that he loves, in service. And those are really the defining characteristics of the king archetype in a harmonious expression. So that's the overview, and now let's dig deeper. Let's look at some of the core attributes of the king archetype so we can understand the constituent parts that actually emerge and reveal themselves in men who step into this role. The first and foremost is leadership and authority. So the king really represents the ultimate authority figure, one who others look to for guidance. They look up to him for protection, and they defer to his wisdom and follow his decisions. He embodies a balanced use of power, which really ensures that his leadership is both strong and just, fair, equitable for all. The king embodies wisdom and insight. So a true king really possesses deep wisdom gained through his massive amounts of personal life experience and deep introspection. He's able to really see beyond the immediate situation and understand the much broader implications of his actions. And it's really this that makes his decisions tailored to the benefit of the greater good. He's not selfish in his decision making. He sees the bigger picture somehow. He is also compassionate and benevolent. So the king is not just a ruler, but he's also a nurturer, a father. He cares deeply for the well-being of his people, and he exercises his power with compassion and with empathy. He is somehow always considering the needs of others in the way that he approaches his leadership. And that really is the hallmark of good leadership. The next characteristic is responsibility and service. Now, the king archetype is really characterized by this deep sense of responsibility. He prioritizes the welfare of his kingdom as well as its inhabitants, and he's often placing their needs above his own needs. And it's this commitment to service which is really central to his role as the leader. And when we look at the shadow characteristics of the king, we'll understand how this plays out in the negative sense when he doesn't have this sort of sense of moral responsibility and service towards his subjects or the people in his community. The king also really embodies the qualities of integrity and honor, and he upholds the highest moral standards. His actions are guided by a very strong sense of integrity, mixed with this deep sense of honor and principle, which earns him the respect and trust of his people. He's also committed to stability and order. So the king provides this structure and order within his domain. He creates this very stable environment where people can thrive, ensuring that justice and fairness are maintained within his kingdom. And those are the main core characteristics of the king. I could have made that list very long, but I decided to keep it fairly concise. So let's look at a few positive examples of the king archetype in film and in literature. The first one that I've got here is Maximus from Gladiator. So he was the Roman general who turned gladiator, and I think he exemplifies the king archetype with his unwavering sense of duty and honor and leadership. Even when he gets stripped of his title and betrayed, he continues to lead with integrity, fighting for that sense of justice and somehow guided by this principle of family. And he unites the people around him wherever he goes. And his journey is one of really reclaiming his rightful power and bringing order back into the realm and back from the chaos that was created when Commodus usurps the throne. And he ultimately sacrifices himself for the greater good. And this really is a very beautiful embodiment of the king archetype. I really love this film, and I've watched it many, many times just to observe and emulate Maximus as a masculine example. He's very, very special in the ways that his energies transmit through that film, in the portrayal of that role. And yeah, we can learn a lot as men from looking at this and studying Maximus. The next example that I have is one that we all know and love, Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. So he's the ranger who becomes the king of Gondor. And in my view, he really represents the archetypal embodiment of conscious masculinity. He's the reluctant hero who steps into his role as leader. And because of that, he's full of humility and really embodies this very balanced approach. And I think Aragorn's journey is really one of his process of self-discovery. Like, you really see the arc of his character as he progresses through the films, in which he eventually has to accept, well, he discovers his lineage, and then he accepts his commitment to service, and then he steps into, and at the very end, he's finally bestowed this great honor and accepts the mantle of responsibility. And yeah, this is such a beautiful archetypal representation of the hero's journey transitioning into the embodiment of the qualities of the king. And you can really get a sense that he's wise and courageous and compassionate and good, and at the same time really embodying that archetypal heroic masculine strength. So we can learn a lot from studying Aragorn. And if you've been following this series, you've noticed I've referred back to the Lord of the Rings many times, with Gandalf, with Frodo, for the hero's journey, for the magician archetype. There's so many potent, beautiful archetypal examples from this film, and I think that is what makes the story and the films so compelling, because they speak to us in such a deep way, and it's so pure. It's so uncorrupted by the modern sort of message that gets sort of permeates into all of the films, so many of the films these days, and corrupts them with kind of like social commentary and this kind of agenda behind everything. And the Lord of the Rings is just like this shining somehow example of the archetypes at play. The next example I have is Morpheus from The Matrix, and I think Morpheus really, as the leader of the resistance, he embodies the king archetype as this visionary leader who really guides and inspires others towards liberation. And it's his calm authority, his deep wisdom, and his ability to see beyond the surface of things that makes him such a powerful example of conscious leadership. He's also got his role as the mentor and protector of Neo, which highlights the king's responsibility to nurture and guide the next generations of leaders. And he does that because he has a sense of vision. He's not just thinking selfishly of this lifetime, his own selfish agenda, this election cycle, as our politics these days are so corrupted by this, very short-term thinking and the grabs for power. Morpheus really embodies this like long-term vision. And I think that's really special and important for us to develop this awareness and to cultivate this sense of long-term thinking, long-term planning, because we can see far into the future, and when that is coupled with our sense of responsibility, this leads to good leadership, strong leadership, conscious leadership. So I wanted to give you guys some examples from modern culture as well, actual humans that are alive in this world and how they've operated and displayed the archetype of the king. The first one I have here is Nelson Mandela. So I think his leadership was really marked by a very deep commitment to justice and reconciliation and the well-being of his people. Mandela's ability to focus on forgiveness and unity and this unwavering moral integrity make him a really profound model for conscious leadership, conscious, responsible leadership. The Dalai Lama could be an example of the king archetype in real life. And this example really exemplifies a certain integration of the spiritual with the responsibility for a group of people. And as a leader of the Tibetan people, I think his stance towards non-violence and this global advocacy for very compassionate, non-violent approach towards politics and geopolitics is a really shining example. And the Dalai Lama's life and his teaching really emphasizes the importance of inner strength, humility, and service to others, which is beautiful qualities of a conscious king. Another example, another masculine example I wanted to give you guys was Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've recently been watching a short documentary series about Arnie and his life. And I was struck by his ability to unite people around him and create this very inspiring movement, first of all, in his career with bodybuilding and his complete dominance of that field. From a young age, it was very clear that he had this vision and this incredible power of manifestation to get himself out of Austria and make his way to America. And he had his idols who he could see occupying this role and winning these competitions and becoming these incredible men. And he was like, that's me. I'm doing that. There was no doubt in his mind. Like, he had this iron will and focus and dedication. And that continued to grow, from that one domain which he mastered and dominated and had so much success in. He then extended that out into the film industry and became super successful in that arena and inspired and motivated so many people through his portrayal of different characters in film. And then he became the governor. He was able to launch from that into politics, a completely different realm. So 3 very different career paths and life, sort of major life areas of life achievement. He was able to to dominate and to really inspire and take this incredible responsibility, somehow going from like personal power, the hero's journey, casting these, in a certain way, this magic through the lens of cinema and influencing in a lot of change and really inspiring a lot of people in a sort of magician-like quality, if you will. And then really stepping into this profoundly responsible leadership role as the governor of California. And this is a beautiful representation of the archetype of the king and the hero's journey moving into the king archetype throughout a man's lifetime. So I think Arnie is a great example of this. Some other examples include Martin Luther King Jr. We have people like Gandhi, who led India. We have people like Obama. Say what you will about Obama, but I think he really displayed this, a balanced approach towards leadership. Very thoughtful, very educated, wise, considerate, diplomatic, and there's a certain representation of the archetype of the king in that sense. And I just wanted to give you guys some varied examples to see that it doesn't necessarily need to be this very linear sort of portrayal of the king. The king can show up in many domains of life. It's less about the domain, it's more about the attitude and the qualities that are embodied by the man in a specific position. When he has that responsibility, when he has a certain amount of power, when people are looking to him for guidance, no matter what realm you're in, this is when the king is being called forth into existence, archetypally speaking. So now, with that said, let's look at some of the shadow aspects of the king archetype to really understand where things can go wrong and how things can be corrupted. So the king archetype, while representing this sort of pinnacle of leadership, wisdom, and authority, it also has these murky, shadowy elements waiting somehow in the wings, in the subconscious. And these shadows really manifest when the king's energy is distorted or unbalanced and unintegrated, which leads to two primary negative expressions of the king, which is the tyrant and the weakling. In terms of the tyrant and his characteristics, first we have the abuse of power. So the tyrant uses his authority to dominate and control others rather than serve and protect them. He rules through fear, manipulation, and oppression, and often uses his powers to exploit and demean those who are under his rule. He is also deeply insecure and paranoid. He's fearful, somehow fearing that others will challenge his authority or take his power away. And this insecurity really drives him to excessive control, often lashing out at perceived threats and somehow stifling any dissent amongst his people. The tyrant lacks empathy, he lacks compassion, and he sees others as a tool or as obstacles rather than human beings. His decisions are basically driven by self-interest, by greed, and a desire for more control, more power, often at the expense of others' well-being. The tyrant's ego is inflated and fragile. He demands constant praise, loyalty, and submission from others, and any sort of perceived slight or challenge to his authority can really lead to harsh and disproportionate retribution. His need for validation often leads to reckless, crazy decisions that harm his kingdom. The tyrant really isolates himself from those who could offer him good counsel and support, and instead he chooses to surround himself with sycophants and yes men who really reinforce his beliefs, leading to a disconnect from reality and an inability to see the true needs of his people. This self-imposed isolation often leads to results in poor decision making, and it often leads to his eventual downfall. The perfect example that comes to mind here in my mind is Hitler, who surrounded himself with fanatics, only the most fanatic people who would basically agree with everything he said, who were too afraid of him to stand up to him or say anything against him. And in the end, he made so many terrible decisions for the German people and was very, very disconnected from the needs of his kingdom, essentially, almost bringing it to the point of complete annihilation. Then we've got the weakling king. So let's have a brief look at the characteristics of the weakling, and then I'll give you guys some more examples. So the weakling king really shirks his responsibilities and he avoids making difficult decisions. He lacks the confidence and the strength to lead, and he often defers to others, or he simply allows chaos to rule and reign over his kingdom. This abdication of his responsibility leads to a lack of direction and a lack of stability. The weakling king is afraid of conflict and confrontation, and he much prefers to avoid situations that require any measure of assertiveness or decisive action. This fear that he has leads to indecision and passivity, which allows problems to fester and worsen over time. Just like the tyrant, the weakling is also plagued by insecurities, but instead of overcompensating with aggression, he becomes overly dependent on others for support and validation. He usually relies heavily on advisors and partners and external influences, which leads to a lack of autonomy and personal power. And the weakling king really struggles to provide a clear vision or direction for his kingdom. He may be very easily swayed by others or uncertain about his goals or his values. And it's this lack of leadership that results in so much confusion, disorder, and failure to inspire or unite his people. The weakling king often loses the respect of those he's supposed to lead. His inability to make decisions, take charge, or stand firm in his beliefs often leads others to see him as ineffective and weak. And it's this loss of authority which can result in rebellion, betrayal, and the collapse of his kingdom. So what I want you to see here is that the qualities of the king, the positive qualities, are somehow juxtaposed by these negative shadow qualities. They're really like the opposite poles somehow. And we need to be mindful of that because we need to have a keen sense of which qualities we're embodying and what we want to portray. And we need to be able to identify when we fall into shadow, or those shadows are somehow acting through us as unintegrated parts of ourselves. And that can be useful, very, very useful as a metric, as a sort of warning sign when we are going wrong. And the more keenly you become attuned to the qualities and the shadows, the easier you will be able to emulate and embody the archetype of the king. So now let's explore a few more examples of the the shadow aspect of the king archetype. And I've got a few more examples from film here. I think Tywin Lannister is a great embodiment of the tyrant because he rules with this iron fist, sort of uncompromising, very callous, calculated. Scar from The Lion King is another example. He betrays Mufasa and takes over his kingdom and tries to kill Simba, usurping the throne, essentially. We have Commodus from Gladiator, which I've already mentioned. Commodus is the emperor's son, who is a bit of a mixture between the weakling and the tyrant. He's deeply insecure. He's not fit for rule. That's why his father chooses Maximus instead, because he knows that he is a general. He's a strong, just, virtuous character, and his son Commodus is not fit for the job. So he gives it to Maximus, and Commodus finds out and betrays him and tries to have him killed and murders his family. So Maximus's whole journey is like seeking retribution, seeking to restore the rightful order. A couple other examples from the Game of Thrones universe include Joffrey as a sort of petty weakling / tyrant version of the king. He's deeply insecure and has to continually proclaim himself, I am the king. And if you have to tell people that you're the king, how much of a king are you really? And we've also got, from the more recent series from House of the Dragon, we've got Aegon, who's similar in kind. In terms of real life examples, really we can look at all of the world's dictators who rule their countries and their people with an iron fist. So we have like people from the rulers from Korea, like Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, that whole family in general. We have people like Stalin, Mao, Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein. All of these characters really show the shadow aspects of the king archetype at play in the world. A more popular example could be people like the Tate brothers, Andrew Tate, Tristan Tate. These guys have amassed a huge fortune, a huge following, and yet their conduct is also, in certain ways tyrannical, very controlling, very abusive towards women, degrading, misogynistic. We could do a whole episode on just pulling apart these guys as examples, but Andrew Tate, I think, is a great example of the shadows of the king. You know, he has a certain charisma, a certain quality, certain qualities, but it's corrupted. He could have been an amazing leader, amazing example for men. But unfortunately, his character has been corrupted by his shadows, which are unintegrated. And if you study and look at him for long enough, you'll see these becoming abundantly clear in the way that he communicates. It becomes very obvious. And that's something I want for you guys, is to start being able to really look at examples in the real world, look at examples in your own life, look at the people around you, look at the other men, and be able to analyze and see their qualities. See what they do embody in a good sense, and also be able to see where they are falling short. Where is their character somehow undeveloped, unintegrated, unbalanced? Where are they perhaps behaving in a shadow, toxic kind of manner? And we need to get better and better identifying that within others and also within ourselves. And the more work you do of this nature on yourself, the easier this process will be, because you will have very clear sense of values, what your values are and what the values of a good, kind, virtuous, strong, balanced leader are. So both the tyrant and the weakling really represent the shadow aspects of the king archetype, which is these distortions that occur when the king's energy is out of balance. The weakling, the weakling is paralyzed by his fear and his insecurities, leading him to be very passive and abdicate the responsibility that he has, which leads to a loss of respect in him. And the tyrant is really driven by his fears, his insecurities, and his lust for power, leading to, abuses and a certain destruction within his kingdom. And really, to embody the king in a healthy sense, one must be aware of the shadows and strive to integrate the positive qualities more and more and more as we move forward. We need that connection to good leadership, a sense of wisdom and compassion and responsibility, which ensures that the power that we accumulate as men is actually used for the greater good, and that whatever power and authority we wield is exercised with integrity and it's balanced. As we talked about in the Magician episode, the one prior to this, I explained how Power has the tendency to corrupt those who wield it. And the king is subjected to the greatest tests of power because his power is so all-encompassing and so absolute. Any cracks or shadows of his character will become like magnified under the pressure of his rule. And that's why ruling is such a trap. As I talked about with Aragon briefly, it's the best kings are the ones that never wanted to be king in the first place and only accept the mantle of responsibility reluctantly somehow, because a well-forged character and a well-forged man can see the traps and he can see the weight of the crown that he is accepting on his head. And he's no fool to think that that power is worth it. It's actually a terrible responsibility, in a certain sense, to be king, because it comes with so much sacrifice. And really, our work here is to help you understand this archetype fully. So if you are to accept the mantle of the king, or call yourself a king, as so many men love to do these days, we hear it in our culture all the time. This term, to be a king is thrown around a lot with little understanding of the responsibility that it actually conveys. And in order to accept that responsibility and to lead with integrity, we need to not get corrupted by the power that we wield when we find ourselves in a position of leadership. This is super important. And as I said in the last episode, you don't know what those temptations and what that corruptive influence feels like until you have tasted some power. And the more power you accumulate, the bigger those tests become, the bigger the temptation is to use your power to advance your own survival agenda. Because that's what the ego does. That's what the ego wants to do. Because power helps you to survive. That's why people want power. Because it makes your survival so much easier when you have influence, when you have wealth, when people look at you and put you in that position. And once you take care of your immediate survival concerns and your needs, then it becomes a slippery slope. It's so much easier to, just a little bit more money. Just a little bit more sex. Just increasing your resources, increasing your stability. And there is this unquenchable thirst. More. And that's where you see guys like Andrew Tate with 20 supercars and 20 girlfriends that he then puts to webcam and he keeps most of the money. And he has all of these girls working for him and earning him money and basically controlling and ruling them with an iron fist. And that's the slippery slope. It starts with, I just need to get ahead. I just need to get myself a house, get myself a car, get myself a girlfriend. And then boom. The slippery slope leads you to being this kind of character at some point. And then you're locked up under house arrest, getting investigated for sex trafficking and rape. This is just an example. This probably is not going to happen to you or anyone that you know, but that's the temptation. That's the threat. That's what happens when the shadows become stronger than the virtuous qualities. And this is a real legitimate concern because, maybe it doesn't become this bombastic, caricaturized version that we see in the media in guys like Andrew Tate, but it can be a petty tyrant. It can be a tyrant within your family, and only the people inside your home see you as this. Everyone else thinks that you're this great guy, but behind closed doors you can be, tyrannical. So it's important to see how this goes from the big and the macro sort of scale that we can observe out there in the world, and comes down into the micro, into your own life. So with that said, let's look at some steps. I want to give you guys some concrete steps to really start to embody this archetype of the king in a harmonious sense, in the archetypal sense, and avoid the traps that I've talked about so far. So first and foremost, one of the most powerful steps we can take is beginning to take on leadership roles in our lives, whether that's in your family, within your community, within your workplace. Anything that puts you into a position of being an example for others and taking a leadership role is going to be really helping you to awaken the archetype of the king. We can start by practicing making decisions that are fair, that are just, that are in the best interests of the people around us and the people that we lead. We also need to cultivate the ability to inspire and guide other people with confidence and with clarity. For me personally, the biggest steps that I've taken in this direction was really starting my men's groups and putting myself in the position of leadership within the community that I've created. And it's sort of interesting in a certain sense, because as I started this series of talking about the archetypes, I'd really felt like the archetypes that I was embodying the most and had related to up until this point were the warrior, the hero, the lover in my life. And I didn't resonate so much with the magician, and I didn't really feel myself to be in a position of calling myself a king in any way. But thankfully, having gone through this process of preparing these materials for you guys and brainstorming these different ideas and examples and coming up with definitions and all of this stuff to present this to you, really helped me to see that actually there was so much of what I was doing related to the magician. So much of this work was actually my quest for knowledge and to step into a role of mentorship, which I have been doing now for years with the men that I work with, especially in my men's groups and in the one-on-one coaching containers that I've created for men who are interested in this work and need support. So that really helped me to see the qualities of the magician in myself. And now, having gone through this process of clarifying the king archetype and educating myself enough to the point that I can speak about it with conviction and share with you guys some interesting insights, I've seen that many of the steps that I've been taking in a certain subconscious way are my sort of preparatory steps for embodying the king. And I've known that in the back of my mind because I've been, especially in the last sort of 3-4 years of my life, been really focusing on building my empire, establishing a certain foundation of wealth and prosperity in my life by really focusing on my business, my career, this work that I'm doing, making it popular, supporting lots of men through these processes. And this is like, I've sort of intuited that this is the sort of formulative steps for me to start feeling that sense of responsibility and sense of leadership that is really starting to help me to embody the king. Early stages somehow. And I see fast forward 10, 20, 30 years when I'm more mature and have been doing this work for much longer, then yes, then I will really be in that position of embodying the king. And I've seen how the role of leadership has really helped me to evolve my character, because it's forced me to step up my game in order to have wisdom to share and to create structure for the men that I'm working with, and that this responsibility has really made me much more mature in my relationship as well. So it's very interesting to see how these concepts boil down into the concrete scenarios and choices that we make in our life. The next step that I want to give you guys is committing to lifelong learning. So we need to really embody the qualities of wisdom and knowledge. I talked about this. It's so important for the magician archetype as well, but for the king, it's also, an integral component. We need to engage in regular self-reflection, seek advice from mentors, and really learn from our experiences. The king is not naive. You want to be a wise king. If you're not wise, that's how you become a weakling or a tyrant. And that wisdom comes from understanding both your successes and your failures in life. So you really need to be able to embrace all the aspects of your journey up until this point, up until the present moment. You need to look back at everything that has happened to you and take stock. I'm not going to go too deeply into this. If you want to understand more of these qualities of wisdom and knowledge, go look at the episode that I did about the magician, because those are really core characteristics of the magician. So I went into much more detail with that. In terms of taking responsibility, you want to really start taking ownership over your actions and the consequence, specifically the consequences of your actions. A king understands that his decisions impact other people, and he strives to act in ways that promote the well-being of his community. I heard a nice quote recently, which was basically saying, I'm not going to quote it directly, basically saying that the difference between a boy and a man is that the boy lives for himself, whereas a man knows that he is a part of something bigger than himself. And he is acting with that knowledge. And this is why exposing ourselves to massive amounts of experience, going traveling, trying different things in life, stepping outside of our comfort zone is so important, because that helps us to see that we exist in community as a collective. And ideally, we want to expand that sense of awareness and that, like, the circle of concern. It needs to extend beyond the limits of our own egoic, selfish survival agenda. We need to expand that out. And that is really the definition of consciousness. How much do you accept responsibility for? How much are you aware of? Are you aware of just your own self, your own needs, your own feelings, your own agenda, your own needs, constantly just fulfilling what you want? It's all about you. You're very selfish. And the more conscious you become, the more selfless you become. the less selfish you are. Because at the highest level, the infinitely conscious mind of God is everything. If reality is one, then consciousness is one, and the more conscious we become, the more we need to resonate with the whole and not just this selfish little part that we call us. So this is super important to understand, because that really gives us like a gradation. It gives us a very clear metric with which to measure our state of consciousness. And as we start to become more conscious, we start to expand our circle of concern. So it goes from just me to me and you, to me and my family, to me and my community, my entire country, and beyond that, the entire world, or all humans, or all life on planet Earth. We can see that Earth is a whole system. And a man who embodies the king archetype sees that his kingdom is connected. It's not just this little square of dirt that he draws a line around because that's the house that he bought. Okay, maybe that's the epicenter of his kingdom. Maybe that's the keep. But his keep is existing within a much larger kingdom, a much larger land on which it is built. And that land is intersected by other humans, other kingdoms, other communities, nature itself. And the king is able to see that his little slice of his kingdom is actually part of something much, much greater. It exists in a big world with a lot of people. There are other kingdoms. And he's taking responsibility for that. And in a certain sense, this is useful for us because really our level of masculinity grows with the proportions of responsibility you take upon your shoulders. Because it's exactly the weight of that responsibility that forges your character, that forges you into a man. And a true king doesn't shy away from responsibility, but rather sees it as an opportunity to serve. So the more responsibility we take, although that is a burden, it also is it's like a way of playing the game somehow. It's a way of leveling ourselves up. Just as a hero in a video game has to go out there and go to battle and fight demons and go down into the pits of hell to slay, these monsters. And in the process, he levels himself up. He gets valuable experience points. He goes up levels, he gains new skills, he finds treasures and artifacts, and he's able to bring those back to his people, just as we talked about in the hero's journey. So responsibility, although it comes with a heavy cost, it's also one of the greatest things that we can do, because we take responsibility for stuff that is bigger than us, and that forces us to expand ourselves. We become bigger as men. And really, if we look at the world needs more men who take responsibility for more than just themselves. Because selfish men have done tremendous damage to the world. Just look at all of the dictators. They sought to enrich themselves and to, infatuate themselves at the expense of the people that they ruled, who they oppressed. So it's so important that we start to really develop a sense of integrity and uphold that. We need to live by the values and the principles that we design for ourselves, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. And that's the real treasure in having integrity, is that when your integrity is tested and you are basically tempted to go against your values, and you align your actions with your beliefs, and you maintain your consistent dedication to those values, then this really makes you shine. This really makes you become an example. This brings honor into all of your dealings, all of your relationships, all of the situations you find yourself in, and that brings a certain shining example quality, which is really special, it's really unique, and it's rare. So this whole work is really helping you to become a rare individual, a unique individual who has really done this work to build the foundations of his character. And integrity, that's a foundation in and of itself. It's the foundation of trust within yourself and within your relationships. Integrity, it's such a core principle for us to develop as men, and that's why I made a whole episode about it. If you haven't listened to the integrity episode called How to Develop Integrity, definitely go back and have a look at that, perhaps after this episode. And really, the qualities that I'm talking about here and these steps, these are things to be practicing over years and decades to come. This is not something you just hear me talk about once and you're like, integrity, leadership, responsibility. These are not things you just mentally masturbate over. These are things that you actually have to work at. These are skills and qualities and characteristics that you will be forging over years and decades, because that's what it takes to build a character. Aragorn wasn't fit to rule as king in the first episode. He was just a ranger. Okay, he was a pretty special guy still then. You could see the seed qualities waiting to emerge in him. But he had to mature. He had to go through those battles. He had to go on the journey in order to reach the place and reach the development of his character. Had to mature enough for him to be able to step in and accept the highest responsibility. And that took a process. You yourself are going to have to go through your own process. You will have to fight battles. You will have to go on a journey. You will have to expose yourself to massive experience and slay some demons and resist the temptations. And through that process, then you arrive at a place where you can rightfully call yourself a king. I'm reluctant to accept that title anytime soon. I can see the qualities starting to emerge in me. I'm making steps in this direction. Maybe one day I will feel like I'm embodying the king archetype. But I feel like I still have a lot to go through and to learn and to integrate and to practice to be deserving of such a title. And I'm okay with that. That's good. That's how it should be. And here's another principle. Like, the best things in life, they take time to develop. They really take long periods of time. Those are the real jewels. That's the real the diamonds in life is the qualities that you develop within your character. And they take decades to forge. A diamond is forged under immense pressure over millions of years, underneath mountains, getting grinded and molten magma that is then like slowly forged and crystallized and compressed and densified over millennia. And as we go through life, we want to, in a certain sense, undergo a similar process of alchemy and transformation. And that whole process, that is so rewarding. So if you can be conscious of it as you're going through it and zoom out enough and see your life and the situations of your life, how they fit into the bigger context, this is a deeply rewarding and fulfilling process that makes the daily challenges, the daily grind that you're going through, all the workouts, all the difficult moments in your relationship, all of the tests in your career or your business, all of these take on like a deeper significance, because you know it's not just about solving your initial survival concerns and making sure there's food on the table. It's like, and beyond that, there is this deeper process of development which is unfolding. And that's fascinating. When you can tune into that and see your life through this lens, then everything has this deeper nuance, which is very, very enriching and very satisfying to be going through that process consciously. In that direction, we need to be able to create stability and order. We can't just be approaching this from a chaotic attitude. You want to work to create like a structured environment in both your personal and your professional life, which really helps you to set clear boundaries, establish routines, and ensure that the people around you feel safe and supported. You yourself need to feel safe and supported. If there's too much chaos, that's not good for a kingdom. And it's very hard to pay attention to the nuances of this work if you're in chaos around you. A really stable environment enables growth and prosperity and transformation to occur in a healthy way. And my recommendation is that you start with your closest relationships and your home environment to bring this into your immediate surroundings, to establish order, to bring harmony, to bring balance, cleanliness, and structure into your life. And then we're going to work outwards. We're going to expand outwards from there. And with this sort of point in mind, I think Jordan Peterson's advice about cleaning your room, for those of you that might not have heard it, Jordan Peterson was sort of famously sort of advising as like one of his 12 rules for life was to clean up your room. Like start by cleaning your room. Like start with the very simple, concrete, measurable thing that you can do immediately right now that will start you on a path of action. Getting off your ass, getting off the couch, cleaning up the dirt, the rubbish, the food, bringing order and structure into your home environment, your room, your workspace. That's a beautiful place to start. And that's something, I've maintained that. I already, from earlier on, I had a more sort of organized relationship with my space. And I've lived with people. I had a roommate, a really close friend of mine, who was the complete opposite. He would live in chaos. I would walk into his room and I could barely see the floor because it was covered in clothes and books and rubbish and food. And for me, that was like anathema. I was like, how do you fucking live like this? How do you get anything done? You don't even know where your like notepad is, or finding a pen, or it's disgusting. And there's a certain reflection within the space that we hold and our mind. If your mind is clear and organized and structured, that sort of reflects in your space. Your space should also be clear, organized, and structured. And you don't want to have a kingdom that is in disarray and chaos. You want to have a kingdom where everything works, everything is neat, everything is tidy, and there is order within the realm, let's say. So that's an important step and something very concrete that I think you can execute immediately. And then go and clean your car as an extension of that. When you get in your vehicle, make sure that it's pleasant, that it's orderly, that it's functional, that it's healthy for you to be in, and not just full of rubbish and dirt and disgusting. And then keep expanding that outwards, keep organizing, keep ordering the world around you, and extend that into your relationships. Extend that into the communication with your beloved. Extend that into your business. Extend that into your emotional well-being. All of this stuff, it's all connected, right? Extend that into your gym, your exercise routine. Bring order, bring structure. Take responsibility for things and practice with the small things, because from the small emerges the large. From the micro, we can see the reflection in the macro. The next step that I want to give you is balancing power and humility. So recognize that true power comes from serving others, not just dominating them. We need to be humble in our leadership. And as I've said already, we need to really acknowledge that we're a part of a much larger system, a much larger whole. And it's this humility, a certain humbleness, that will allow you to lead with grace and win. You win the respect of the people that you guide. You don't just force them into it. And the wise and truly powerful king doesn't need to go around forcing other people to bend the knee or to obey him. He actually just inspires and earns and wins the respect and admiration and the devotion of the people around him because of the quality of his character. And that's so much more beautiful to receive the love and devotion from people and their admiration when you had nothing to do in forcing it. It's simply given to you as a gift because it's a reflection of what you actually embody. So much more powerful, so much more meaningful, so much more true. The next step is committing to service. So you want to really start dedicating yourself to serving your community, whether that's through volunteering, through mentorship, or simply being a place of reliable support for others and the people that you care about. Understand that your role as king is to uplift and empower the people around you. It's through his service to others that makes his kingdom truly shine. And that's what makes it a place where people want to be and want to reside, because they feel like they are protected and provided for. And they in turn then feel very generous in giving their gifts in supporting the kingdom. And like this, a community thrives. So this is super important to understand and to practice. The next and final step here is to really engage in spiritual growth. It's vital that you connect with your spiritual side, whether that's through meditation, through prayer, through psychedelics and retreats, or deep academic study in this direction. You really need to understand your place in the universe. And beyond that, the deeper purpose behind all of your actions and a deeper sense of meaning to everything that you do. The king archetype is as much about spiritual leadership as it is about worldly power. And it's really this combination and synthesis of these two things that gives a man true wisdom. And that's what really enables him to embody his power in a conscious way. Otherwise, that power will become corrupted. He needs to be deeply wise, deeply conscious, deeply spiritual, in other words, in order to handle the power that is given to him. So those are the main sort of steps that I wanted to give you guys in order to start awakening the king archetype. I think it's really important to relate to these archetypes in your own unique way. What I've described here can sound very lofty and sort of idealistic, like a myth or a legend from a fairy tale or fantasy novel or film. But it's really completely possible for us as men to resonate with this archetype and to start embodying these qualities in our lives and in our relationships and in our communities. It's actually not such a step. It takes this intention. None of us are going to become Aragorn and rule over a kingdom like Middle-earth, but we can resonate with him as an example of archetypal masculinity and really seek to model ourselves in the spirit of men like him and to live by these kind of principles. I hope you can see how powerful this can be, because it is truly rare. It is very rare, and this can really sort of put you into a category and a tier of men who are unique and very, very appreciated in the world. You know, I hear from women constantly on my social media, like, where are these kind of men that you talk about? Where are all the strong, conscious men? All I see is idiots and assholes and narcissists and misogynistic pigs. And yes, online it's very easy to think that that's what men are, because those kind of men tend to be the loudest. We need to make an army of men who are louder through the shining nature of their example and who lead with integrity and strength and honor. This is what the world needs. This is what the women of our community are calling for. And this is what we can become if we so choose. So that's almost it for this episode. I really hope you've enjoyed this series on the masculine archetypes. I do actually plan on adding more to this collection of episodes in the future. I've already been thinking about another episode which can help to really use the full spectrum of these archetypes and talk about the different archetypes at different life stages. You may have noticed that there is kind of like in the example of my own life, how I've talked about, you know, stepping into the warrior gives us that personal sense of power. Stepping into the lover, we harmonize our relationships. Stepping into the magician, we start to get a bigger picture understanding of life and develop this wisdom and knowledge. And stepping into the king is embracing this leadership. There's an almost like a journey there through all of the archetypes, and I want to make another episode talking about this in more depth and how we can use the archetypes more in practical life situations, the challenges that we face in our life. We can use the archetypes and call upon the warrior's strength, or the lover's compassion, or the magician's wisdom, or the king's leadership, and we can actually use these in a more fluid sense to handle different moments in our life. So I'm thinking and dreaming up another episode sort of talking about that. There's also a lot we can say about shadow work, and there's many other archetypes we could talk about to bring more depth to all of this, but I just wanted to start with the sort of these 4 pillars to kick things off and give you guys a bit of a taste. I'm really just starting to build up. This is just early days. I've got long range plans, and I really want to take this work very, very far and take it up to the highest levels. At the moment, I'm just picking the low-hanging fruit and finding these sort of topics to talk about, which I think will resonate with a lot of you. And we'll be expanding this to much more esoteric, metaphysical, philosophical sort of topics in the years ahead. So I'm really excited to see how this evolves. And I really appreciate so much all of your support. As always, it's amazing. I'm getting such heartwarming feedback from you guys. So that's really special, and I really appreciate that. The men's community is thriving. We're having weekly meetings over Zoom. And if any of you feel inspired by this work and you feel like you want to surround yourself with other men who are on this path, you want to have a band of brothers, because the journey is just better when you have brothers by your side. And we learn a lot faster by having that kind of accountability of other men in our lives. I'm also in the process of designing some retreats in the year ahead that I'll be running down here in Australia, in Tasmania. And once I have more experience with that, I'll be definitely creating more retreats overseas in other countries, probably in Thailand, something in Europe. So definitely stay tuned for that. If you feel like joining the community and the online course, just click the link underneath this video, and that'll take you to learn more about that. And if you're a man who feels like you would like a mentor and you would like one-on-one support in this work, and you feel like you would benefit from more accountability, me putting the lens over your exact situation and pulling apart everything you're doing in order for you to embody conscious masculinity in a much more rigorous sense, you might like to check out the one-on-one coaching containers that I offer. You'll find a link to that in below this video as well. So if you like this episode, I would love to hear your comments and reviews, and subscribe to the YouTube channel or the podcast and let me know what you thought about this episode. I really listen to and look at all of the feedback that I get and put that into my calculus for developing new episodes, and it's really useful at this stage for me to hear what you guys think. And I really appreciate that so much. So lastly, I'll just leave you guys with a bit of a send-off and some final insights just to round off this episode and this series. Remember, the archetypes are a way of playing the game of life. They're a model for us to follow as men. The king is the synthesis of all the other masculine archetypes. He embodies the warrior's courage and strength. He attends to his relationships and leads from his heart, just like the lover. And he is wise and worldly, like the magician. And he understands the proper order of things. And above all of that, he represents the most archetypal expression of masculinity in its fullest form. He is strong, powerful, and he impacts the world. He has a queen by his side to share his throne and his kingdom with. He balances worldly pursuits with spiritual wisdom and development. He leads with purpose, with vision, and with responsibility. And he wins the love, the respect, the admiration of the people in his community because of the impeccable quality of his character. He thinks and plans for much more than just his own personal needs and selfish desires. He is a visionary, a strategist, a loving father, a passionate lover, a ferocious warrior, a wise sage, and a humble man. All mixed into one. This is the bar that is set for you as a man. This is the standard that you can rise towards and claim in this lifetime. So it's with this said that I challenge you to aspire towards embodying the most noble, the most virtuous, and the most powerful expression of masculinity, the archetype of the king.